that's how powerful this type of lifestyle is. It allows you to have control over your person again.
Doug, how did you find Carnivore?
Yeah. Honestly, I found it on Instagram. There was an influencer named Carnivore Ray, and it's been over how long I've been on this, 6 months, that he just kept coming up in my feed just over and over and over again. And being part of a generation that was raised on the fat free like mantra that everything had to be fat free and sugar free and cholesterol is bad. It When I first started seeing it, it was really interesting. I just started watching his videos. I was like, this guy's cholesterol has got to be out of control. But he got fit. I mean, he like legit got fit. He looked amazing, but he was also super entertaining. And so, we moved to Texas about 3 years ago from Washington State, and Texas has got some of the best food on the planet, just hands down some of the best food. And in that 3 years, I had gained a lot of weight. Probably, when I got to Texas, I was overweight. I was probably 30 pounds overweight and gained another 50 pounds being here over that 3 years. And and one morning, I was sitting in bed scrolling like everybody does, and just miserable being at 280 because you're kind of invisible into society. You're just Nobody takes you really serious at work. It's hard to have conversations, stuff like that. And I'm only 51 years old. I don't feel 280 pounds. I can still move. I don't have any issues. I'm just average. And so I came out. My wife was making coffee, and I asked her, I said, "Can you look at this? Can you look at this for me? I'm going to send you a reel. His name's Carnivore Ray. Can you just look into it? Because I got to go to work, and it's just pinging around in my mind. Something's with it. Something's there." And by that afternoon, 3 o'clock, she called me at work. She goes, "We're doing it. We're all in." And I was like super scared because we've been told our whole life that don't eat red meat, don't eat butter, all these things. And she went to the warehouse club like Costco, Sam's Club, and loaded up on meat. I mean, we were noobs at this, and we overbought, and we just went all in from that moment on. And that was kind of how we heard about it. And you know,
So, how long ago was this?
that
Six
was
months ago,
yeah, it's June 28th, 2004. and
right?
and so we've like I mentioned to you before, we've had trauma on top of trauma, and I kind of half grinned through it, right? But um, you think in life that you're gonna like it's like a movie, right? It's the script is written for you. Like the hero hits an inflection point, and then he hits rock bottom. Then he makes the big comeback and becomes the hero again. And I've had a couple of those really inflection points. I've experienced what a parent doesn't want to experience, and that's loss of a child. And when that happened, I thought, this is it. This is going to correct everything in my life. I need to do better for my son who's no longer here. I need to make him proud. And I did exactly the opposite in that 4 years since he's been gone, almost five. And it's just been, I think that's part of dealing with trauma. You tend to rely on food for comfort. And my wife and I gave each other a lot of space, and we enabled each other to do what we thought we needed to do. And then just before we started the carnivore, we were going up to see my mom and dad in Montana. My mom had just passed away the month earlier, so we're going up there for a celebration of life. It was important, and we had to drive from Texas to Montana with our dogs, and we were fully loaded up. But I drove my family right into a tornado. And so, like I said, it's you kind of like this level of trauma is incredible. But it was late at night in Texas, and I like to drive at night because the family sleeps, and I can get all the way almost halfway there before everybody wakes up. But we got an emergency, and warning came through on the radio and said imminent danger, take shelter. In Texas, tornadoes happen 400 or 500 times a year, but you never think it's going to happen to you. But we took shelter in a Shell gas station outside of Valley View, and it took a direct hit. It took out our truck. It could have killed could have killed all of us. And 70 people in there, maybe 80, we all survived without a scratch. It was a miracle. It was just a miracle. And so you think that's going to be the thing that triggers you. You're like, I got a new lease on life. I'm gonna lose all this weight. I'm gonna become fit. But it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. We had to process all that grief, my mom passing away, the tornado, my son still being kind of fresh in the back of my mind. And I do not regret the June 28th day. It was not an easy day. We started in the evening, and I'm very thankful that I found Carnivore Ray and this whole community, you and Sophia, the Carnivore Mermaid. It's just been a blessing. And I've watched a lot of your videos, and trying to like bring people with you is now my goal, is to bring people with me on this.
So, like you started June 28. So,
Yeah.
what was the point that you realized I'm doing the right thing? This is working. Something's happening.
Yeah, it was within a few days. You start to feel full quick. You've Everybody talks about satiety a lot, but it was easy. And let me tell you how I know it's easy compared to other things. And there's a lot of diets out there. There's fasting diets, but the one that my wife and I have always, because we do CrossFit together, so we have a gym in our garage, in fact. So we have some goals we want to reach, and weight and muscle to weight ratio is super important. But but the whole 30 is blown up over the last 10 years, and it's a complete train wreck when it comes to trying to control your insulin. And so my wife and I have failed more whole 30s than we've completed. I think we've tried 6 and we've completed 2, and it's just a miserable experience. And so you eating whole foods for 30 days, and you're just counting down the hours, minutes to the last 30, the end of the 30 days. And one day we woke up and we're like, it's day 35. What happened? Where did the time go? Like, we're just like, that was the easiest thing we've ever done. And so that made me a believer. Like, you naturally fast. If you eat breakfast in the morning, you might not eat until might not be hungry until the next day, because you're nutrient full. You're actually experiencing satiety.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. I mean, after we're a similar age, so after a lifetime of just feeling hungry the whole time,
Yeah.
um, you know, doing carnivore and then realizing I don't have that kind of fascination with the refrigerator anymore. It's amazing.
No, and your life no longer revolves around food. I
Mm.
was probably eating, let's in Texas, Chick-fil-A is really popular, barbecue is really popular, but one thing is, like, Starbucks is huge. And I haven't had a Starbucks in 6 months, or a Diet Coke, or any of that stuff. It just was so almost instant. And so having that small bit of data, dealing with the whole 30, not controlling my insulin, which is really key to this, and becoming fat adapted, which doesn't happen instantly. You can go into ketosis, but becoming fat adapted for me took probably a good 4 months. And I think I'm still becoming fat adapted. I think it's still going to take time. It took decades to be carb adapted. So it's going to take months to become fat adapted. But
So, physically, what kind of changes did you notice?
yeah, so far here's what I love about the carnivore diet. Now, I take a fat first approach to the carnivore diet, and that's what I've learned about this. And I'd love to share this with you, just because there's people that do OMAD, strict carnivore, just steak and eggs and butter, water. One thing I've noticed is the plateaus are pretty significant. So for me, weight loss was the number one thing. Remember, getting to that strength to weight ratio was super important for me to get physical, or to get back in shape in the gym and do, like, I can finally do pull-ups again, real strict pull-ups. So I lead with 60 to 70, even 75% of my calories in good healthy fats. And then the rest comes in the form of moderate protein. And I discovered that because, maybe you've noticed this, the Sean Bakers, the Carnivore Rays, they all eat one type of steak, and that is the ribeye, right? Everybody eats the ribeye. And if you, I use ChatGPT for a lot of my knowledge and understanding. Is the typical ribeye averages between 65% fat calories and 75% fat calories, depending on the cut. So I mimic that in my diet. So I do embrace some things like extra virgin light olive oil to make sure I can get that fat intake up, which is not carnivore. I understand that. So, and it's no harm, no foul, but I'm not drinking this stuff. I'm just making homemade mayo with it to give the food some texture and the like, Um, so yeah, that's about as far as I get away from carnivore, or I stay animal based for most of the time. But
And so that 65 to 75, sorry, 60 to 70% fat,
yeah,
predominantly that's fat coming from like the fat that's on the meat. That
meat,
is that
cheese,
butter or
yeah, butter, meat, hard cheeses like cheddar cheese, like I mentioned, homemade mayo. And then I put my recipes into ChatGPT. I say, hey, here are the ingredients I have on hand. I'm thinking burger bowl, or I'm thinking, um, you know, just anything, and it spits out the ratios for me. Then I measure it out, but I always measure out into my bowl or my plate. My typical meal when I put it in there, I say I want a 1,200 calorie meal, and uh, and it spits it out. It says two tablespoons of butter, 3 ounces of cheese, 8 ounces of hamburger or ground beef, and I put it in a bowl and I start eating. And the goal is to get full. And I very seldom ever finish these plates or these bowls. And because of that, I've kind of figured out this rhythm with the food by not counting calories because I put way too many calories on the plate. I've lost 65 pounds, and it was a very slow burn, and I'm perfectly happy with that because I don't think I've lost any muscle. I think that's what's beautiful about carnivore and animal based.
right? Wow, 65 pounds, and that's in a
Yeah,
period of
6
six
months.
months.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Oh, nice.
And it
Um,
changed everything. It's changed
yeah.
everything. I'm no longer invisible at work. I'm in a leadership position where I have to lead people, right? And so I now people like just leading people became 100% easier. Like they just listen better. They want to hear what you have to say. It just
So
you know. Go ahead.
when you say you're not invisible anymore,
Mhm.
um, can you kind of how is that manifested? You know, because I think it could be that you just feel more confident about, talking to people, leading people, that kind of thing. Or perhaps there's something about you, like some aura thing or something that's changed, some atmosphere thing that's changed that people are suddenly like, oh, hang on, this guy's we should be listening to this guy.
Yeah, you've actually touched on the biggest one first. The latter happened as well. Like once you feel more confident in your person, it's almost unstoppable. You just want to be putting yourself out there. But when I say invisible, they weren't making me invisible. I was making myself invisible. I wouldn't speak up during meetings. Now I'm a lot more forthcoming with my opinions, especially if they're righteous. Like, hey, this isn't good for the business, then this is why. And this started happening about 40, 35, 40 pounds in when I hit that. And people never said anything. The first 20 pounds, nobody said anything. 40 pounds, once again, they noticed, but they were like, the face started getting skinnier, but they still didn't say anything. But it was 60, 65 pounds, people started walking across the room and being like, what did you do? Where have you been? I don't see you every day. What have you been doing? And I said, I'm doing carnivore. And they immediately like, oh, what is your cholesterol like? That's crazy. You can't just eat meat and eggs. And I'm like, slow down. It's not that. It's more of I'm controlling my insulin at the lowest level, the fat storage hormone. And I'm controlling all the other hormones, ghrelin, leptin, CCK, PYY. And I'm experiencing like life is so much easier. And so, yeah, that's what it was. It was, I'm now more confident to have these conversations. And people are starting to follow me. And one guy at work's now doing, actually, two guys at work are doing the same thing, carnivore. And we talk about it like all the time. I wouldn't say I'm mentoring them, but I answer their questions.
And this is how it spreads.
Hmm.
from with this grassroots movement. It's people actually just seeing it works, and it's not just the weight that's disappearing either. It's all these other things.
All
It's
these
like your
other.
confidence and the way you present yourself and all this kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, maybe what I'm doing is not working for me. I've followed the advice all these years and I
100%.
don't get any results. So maybe I should try something else.
Yeah. And I will be honest with you. I thought there was no hope. I honestly thought there was no hope. Like, I've tried vegetarian, I've tried juice fasting, I've tried Whole 30s, I've tried carb cycling, but there's nothing that fits the human condition better than carnivore, or like I said, a fat first diet like carnivore. Nothing fits it better. It's the way we're designed to live. And the one that always blows them away, well, what do you do about fruits and vegetables? I don't eat them. I don't eat them. I'll introduce them again in the future when I'm at my optimal weight, but it'll be at very small amounts, and they have to be the right fruits or vegetables. And if you think about the history of time, we did not ever have this access to food. You should never be able to walk in this grocery store and get an apple in December, or
Right. They weren't eating mangoes in
no,
Iceland a
no.
100 years ago, right?
So that's what's kind of hit me. I'm sitting here going, hold on. We're just going back to our grassroots, like you said. We're just living how we're designed to live, and we aren't. We're the apex predator, and we're not really omnivores. We're more like facultative carnivores, meaning, yeah, we can eat spinach in a pinch, but if you say, hey, here's two dishes, here's a ribeye steak or a spinach salad, our mind's going to go for the ribeye steak. That's where we want to be.
Yeah, that's I always kind of liken the way we seem to want to eat to that of dogs. Like if you put down a
Great,
bowl of
great
meat for a
example.
dog, or you put down a bowl of salad. I mean, if there's nothing else, the dog's going to eat the salad, but it's not going to pass up the steak for the salad.
No, and I'm glad you brought. I think it's funny you brought that up because before I started carnivore, I was like, if I just ate like I have Shih Tzus, I have three Shih Tzus. It's like they don't eat this stuff. Why don't they eat this stuff? They don't. I mean, yeah, if you give them an ice cream cup, they'll definitely eat it. But they would take a steak over an ice cream cup, I think, in a minute. So that's an interesting observation. I love that small data.
Yeah, and domesticated dogs are the animals that will also develop diabetes if we continue to feed them the way that we eat, right?
Yep, that's right. A lot of our we've gotten better with our spoilage on carnivore for sure. Our beginning, it broke my heart. We did lose some meals or some meats, and we would chop it up and reheat it up and give it to the dogs, and so they love it. They love us being on carnivore because they get this great source of food as well. But yeah, we've definitely gotten into a rhythm, but it's always changing. We're always learning and figuring out how our palates changed and the like. My wife's a ribeye person. She could eat ribeye morning, noon, and night. But she's an interesting story. She's a um, freakishly strong athlete, and so she was a very talented biathlon at a young age, and she's just one of those people that just does well in the CrossFit gym. Is very strong, and but food has always been something that has been a big part of her life. And carnivore, she's like, I'm never hungry. And she's down 45 pounds. I think she's within 1 or 2 percentage points of me as a percentage of her starting weight to now. We're tracking about the same. But she's like, her life's turned around. She's like no longer thinking about food, morning. When are we going to eat lunch? When are we going to eat dinner? She just eats when she's hungry, which is beautiful because all kinds of productivity come out of that in your life. Like doing interviews like this, you don't have to revolve your life around food. And she's now experiencing that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that reminds me of something like in the before times, if I went out somewhere
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, we were visiting some kind of traditional historical place or something like that, or some park or something, and you get there and then you'd realize, oh, there's no there's nowhere we can eat around here. Well, there's one place and there's a line a mile long outside it or something. And you'd
Hmm.
be like, no, well, this is not going to do. How am I going to be here for a few hours and not be able to go somewhere and eat something?
100%.
And
100%.
all that's just gone.
Yeah, it's just you can actually enjoy your time wherever you're visiting, and you can trust that you've fueled your body properly, maybe from breakfast. But once again, I always like to tell people, could you imagine a time where, how do I say this? You're not you're not living to eat, you're eating to live, And so now when you eat, you're like, this is has a purpose. And I'm not trying to ruin my relationship with food and just make it a fuel. I'm just trying to make it proper, like a good relationship with food, not a toxic relationship with food.
Well, and that's what it's like. It's like a toxic relationship, right? Like
Yeah,
traditionally, because
exactly.
you're in this relationship and you hate it. You're like, I don't want to do this. I want to stop. I want to stop, but you just can't,
Hmm.
right?
That's
You keep
exactly.
going back. You keep going back to the ex,
Hmm.
you keep,
Yeah.
but when you go carnivore, you break that toxic relationship with food, and then it's just become like when we're together, we can enjoy our time together, but we don't have to spend 100% of our time together.
Yep. Yep. You can just enjoy it and move on. Yep. And that even translate like before carnivore, before June 28th. And this was really like I talk a lot about small data and insulin and leptin and ghrelin, and I've geeked out on this, and I understand it to some point where I think I understand it well enough to explain it to a sixth grader, okay, or somebody that's interested. But there's so much small data, and that is you. My wife and I eat breakfast together every morning now. In the 10 years that we've known each other, this is completely new, and so that's a like I would just eat something and rush out the door, go to work, and try to beat traffic. Now I don't care if I show up 30 minutes. That's not going to come out right. I have a pretty flexible schedule. Okay. So I can show up at 8 or 8:15, 8:30, and I take advantage of that. And I have breakfast with my wife and my son now, which is awesome, you know. Um, and I just look at those moments where now we're using food properly. The relationship is proper. I'm now using it with my family properly, and I'm eating a proper amount of calories as well, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So on that point, how do you typically eat day to day? How many times?
I
And is it predominantly ribeyes, as you said?
and now I'm more of a ground beef person. I'm a ground beef, eggs. I love chuck roast, lots of butter, and my pattern is really like brain dead simple. Put more food on your plate than you need, and that happens in the morning. So I make a lot of omelets, 5, 6 egg omelets with 3 or 4 ounces of cheese. I mentioned the homemade mayo. Like I hope nobody gets upset about that, but I mentioned the homemade mayo for fat calorie to get that fat calories up. But I run it all through ChatGPT to make sure like what's on the plate in a percentage of what I want to ingest is 70% fat calories or more, but not crazy like 90%. And then I just listen to my body, and just like you've experienced, I mean, I'm sure you'll be eating a ribeye steak in the morning or what have you, or eggs and steak. And as soon as I start to feel full, I stop eating. And I do a lot of experiments. Like, did that carry me till dinner time? Did that carry me? So I literally don't eat until I'm hungry again. But one of the big things I'm trying to do now that I have this new phase I'm going through is whatever I eat, I try to I try to move more. I try to do resistance training more. I try to walk more, and whether it's yard work or just parking further from work or whatever, I don't look at it as a bad thing. I just say this is good because I got to use up this newfound energy source called me and my food. But I just listen to my body when it comes to eating. I've experienced OMADs on a natural state where I just eat once a day, and I've also experienced where I've had to eat twice a day or 3 times a day. But it's not uncommon if I'm working. My wife will say, "You have to eat," and I'll be like, "I'm literally not hungry. I'm literally not hungry. I just don't want to eat until I'm hungry." And I think that's paid huge dividends in understanding the body and so forth. But there's one thing I think is really interesting. I would love to get your opinion on it about carnivore, and I see this on Instagram a lot. And everyone, and we have a ton of people saying it's a terrible diet, and they just don't like they don't like carnivore. Period. And anytime they hear someone loses weight, they say, "Oh, you were in a calorie deficit." And I challenge them, and I say, "Okay, that would assume I was in a calorie appropriate before. Maybe I'm at a calorie appropriate now, and I've been in a calorie surplus for the last 4 years or 5 years. So that this whole thing of trying to beat carnivore down because it's just a deficit diet, I'd like to change that mantra to no, it's just a calorie appropriate diet. I know you do OMAD, right? You've done them, so it's like that's your calories.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like this is just, I mean, one of the most
Mm-hmm.
prolific. Oh, you just it's just because you're eating less calories. People is Lane Norton, constantly talking about how you. It's got nothing to do with the type of food. It's all to do with the calories. But for me, my feeling is it does like volume wise, if you want to call it calories, like it's we're probably eating more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if the simple fact is, if you are measuring by calories, saturated fat has way more calories than any carbohydrate does. Um,
Absolutely.
so the thing is, we're eating more effective volume, um, but it's volume that is going to be used by our body. And so when you're eating something that your body goes, okay, well, thanks for that. I know exactly what I need to do with this. Um, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to like mess around and think, oh, what am I doing with this garbage he's just
Yeah,
ingested?
it's
Like
like
I said, nutrition, idiot.
yeah,
Like there's no, and
exactly.
also I mean, I'm not a doctor, scientist, anything like that, but my understanding is when you eat a gram of carbohydrate,
Mm-hmm.
your body stores 4 grams of water for that
Mm-hmm.
carbohydrate that you've consumed. So, like, I mean, there's that part of it as well. You're unnecessarily retaining water. Um, or I mean, it's necessary because you're eating the carbohydrates, but in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things, it's unnecessary. You don't need to eat those carbohydrates. So, um, yeah, I think you're just eating less calories is way too simplistic an argument.
Yeah, I'd be like, I have that argument with people all the time, and they say, "Oh, you're," because I think if I'm not hungry and I'm still moving from point A to point B, and I'm lifting, heavy objects over a short distance quickly, I'm like, what's the big deal? I'm still performing what I want to perform, and I'm not. And then you get into the mental sharpness of everything. You all of a sudden one day you're just like, I hear words coming out of my mouth, and I don't know how they're formulating from here to here. So different. They're just like they just sound better, and
Right,
they
right.
don't sound like gobbledygook. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, sounded good.
So just to follow up on this point, I think also when people say, "Oh, it's just because your calories are less," that's a simple answer,
Hmm.
and that suits the type of person that's giving you that answer because their idea of how energy works is also very simple, which is calories in, calories out, right?
That's right.
And like, so it's like, well, if my idea of how we get nutrition into our body is simple, then obviously the way to lose weight must be simple as well. And like, if that's also where you can't argue with someone like this,
Yep.
really, because arguing like, well, it's all about nutrition and it's about how your body's dealing with what you're putting into it and all that kind of thing. They that's too much nuance,
Yep.
and they're not built to handle that, right? Because most of the
Yep.
people that are saying this are people that the
That believe
only
is spinach.
way they've got that opinion is from the marketing messages they've
Hmm.
heard throughout their lives, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like just try to have the argument around vegetables. It's like spinach isn't. I'm not going to tell you don't eat it. I'm going to tell you please don't eat it. It's not good for you. It's not. And I've heard this mantra ever since I was, I mean, from my grandmother on up, my aunts, and I just heard it this summer. Green's good. Green is good. It's like, yeah, there's no, like we've heard it, there's no essential carbohydrate out there. If you need carbs, you'll make them. I'm oversimplifying that, I know, but I mean, you can't live without fat. You can't live without protein, but you can live without carbs. Like I said, I think there's some seasonality around it. If you were in a pinch and you saw an apple tree and you're starving, you would definitely eat that apple, no doubt. But like I said, we lean toward the hunt more than we do the harvest, you know, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things. I think I appreciate the voice you're giving us to sit on a stage like this to have these conversations. But when people finally dive in, like my wife, the two gentlemen at work, they see it and it happens pretty quick and it's almost effortless. It is almost effortless.
Mm-hmm.
And you just want to share it with people. You just want to
That,
bring
that
people with you.
that's right. It's complete perspective shift, right?
Yes.
Because you could never have imagined, like we talked about the relationship with the refrigerator before or whatever.
No,
You could never have imagined that there'd be a time where you can look at the refrigerator and feel like I have no emotions tied to you anymore at all.
no. I'll share this with you with the refrigerator story. I have three king size Hershey bars in there. And every night I would have a piece of chocolate with some peanut butter with our youngest, or just because I felt like I deserved it. I worked out, or those three candy bars are still in the fridge. So you want to talk about this didn't take willpower to do this. Like I look at them every day and they're still sitting in there. And that's how powerful this type of lifestyle is. It allows you to have control over your person again. That I have a true crutch sitting in the fridge right now. I could go open one of them up and eat it, but I'm have zero desire to have a candy bar and some peanut butter. It's just I've never experienced such control ever, and it leads to all kinds of benefits and productivity all over your daily life. It's just impressive.
Ye-
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to agree with that. Yeah, when you're not thinking about food or what the next snack's going to be all the time, yeah, like suddenly you realize you've got an extra couple of hours in the day.
Yeah, you don't, and you're not stopping. And there's a lot of like latency to that kind of food that you don't feel. You've just been dealing with it for so long, you don't feel it until you're out of it. And that, like, I wouldn't say I'm scared to death of sugar. I say I'm really scared of sugar now. I really would. Sleep's improved to the point where I'm sure you've heard this with other people. I've heard it. I no longer snore. I've snored my whole life. My wife has to actually wake up in the middle and check on me. She's like, "Are you?" But I don't move. I go to sleep like this and I wake up like this. It's just phenomenal. And I get rested. I wake up and go
Mm,
do what I hope, go accomplish whatever I want to accomplish,
yeah,
as much as possible. But
nice.
sleep's been better.
So at this stage, it's carnivore all the way for
Oh,
you.
yeah. Yeah. I don't see this. Great question, by the way, because I get this question like a lot. And I do enjoy this newfound freedom, even though I've been feeling it come on for 6 months. But the gym feels great, work feels great, life feels great. I feel like everything's under control. Why would I go back to a standard American diet, if you will? I don't even feel the desire to embrace the. I wouldn't call it cheating, but like having a meal outside of this, like if we go to a steakhouse, that's about as close as I'm going to get to coming off the carnivore. Um, I mean, going out to eat it's better. It's got to be around that diet, that this specific requirements. And I go out to a lot of luncheons with my leadership team, and they've been. Here's what's amazing, because at the beginning I felt like I was I was breaking the status quo for sure, 100% breaking the status quo. But I can't believe out of all I mean, there's 10 or 11 of us, right? They all pick places so I can eat, like almost like I have an allergy. It's like we can't go there because Doug's allergic to spinach. So they pick places. So when we go out to our lunch and we meet as a team, they're like, you should be able to eat here. We checked, and I think that's really important that people who are afraid to start these types of lifestyle changes, that people will respond very positively to you, especially as you see your changes come about.
That's really nice. Um, so if a friend came to you and said, so let's say someone else at work comes to you and says, okay, well, you're doing really well. The other two guys are doing really well. I want to get started. How would you recommend they get started with carnivore?
So I lead by taking them to lunch. I take them to lunch, and I because I want them to sit down with me in an environment that they're used to. So I take them to, you can eat McDonald's patties, if you will, but we have here in Texas, we have Whataburger and In and Out, and I order us up 4 patties, and I order them with cheese, just like because I want them to not be so separated from their normal space. I put them in a comfortable environment. I literally did this Wednesday. In fact, I did it on Wednesday, and I order the food. We sit down, and I bring a little bit of my homemade mayo with me, and I share it with them. Most people like homemade mayo, or they like mayo, and we start eating, and then we just talk about what you're going to experience during this meal, and I want them to feel that satiety kick in and recognize it, and then we go through all the details. There's not a lot of details to go through but I needed them to experience that moment of satiety or fullness. And we just did it on Wednesday with a guy from work, and I said the best way to do this is if I show you how it works. And he got a 4 patties with cheese, and he's like, if you wouldn't have been sitting here explaining this to me, I know I couldn't have finished this, but it made me realize how much the fries, the Coke, and the bun and all the carbs that surround this meal impact my desire to finish it. But he says, this was delicious. I am full and I still have half of it left. I'm going to take it home to eat. And later that night, I talked to him over text. It's like, are you ready to do this? And he's 80 pounds overweight, just like I was, roughly. And he's like, yeah, I'm all in. Let's do this. But that's how I do it. I put them in a comfortable environment that they're familiar with, and I do it with them. I mean, I'm hungry, so let's go get lunch.
Awesome. That's a really good way of introducing it. Yeah. Um, so Doug, is there a way people can reach out to you? How can they get in
Yeah,
contact? Do you have a website or anything?
yeah. I do a fat first carnivore version, and I kind of bend. I wouldn't call them rules. I've just got a derivative of carnivore that I use, and a lot of times I'm on a pretty strict carnivore diet. But just like you, I'm trying to spread the word and at scale. So I do have a website called fatisfuel.com, and I've even done an audio course to give to people. It is for sale, but if they put in zero carb, the discount zero carb, I will gladly gift them a copy of the audio course and the guide to anybody that wants to try it out. I would love it if they get feedback. I just got some positive feedback from one of my followers on Instagram, and he's built a lot like me, and he says, I think his words were like, "This hit right. This was right what I needed to hear." You know, it made sense to him, and I appreciate you for letting me put that little subtle plug in there. I really do appreciate that. But it's fatisfuel.com.
No worries. I'll link to it in the show notes. And just to clarify, so the coupon code is zero carb, as in ZERO carb.
Yep, is in your
Yep.
is in your YouTube handle.
Thank you so much for coming on, Doug, and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you very much for having me here. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.